All right. Welcome to the Progressive Hub Show, hosted by Roots Action. I am your host today, Ricci Sergienko, and I am joined by Braxton Brewington, an organizer with the Debt Collective. Braxton, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Richie.
Absolutely. And so we're here to talk about student debt, the Debt Collective, where we're at with the president, Joe Biden. We recently had Maddie Clifton on from the Debt Collective and had a great discussion, but that was a month ago, and things have changed since then. So just for the listeners, can you give a breakdown of where we're at in the process of student loans?
Yeah, so what are we, late September? So, interest has resumed and payments begin October 1st. For the first time since March 13th, 2020 is when payments were paused, well over 3 years ago. So
Donald Trump paused the student loans.
when Donald Trump first paused student loans and Biden extended it and extended it and extended it and extended it again and again, and then stopped. The reason the pause stopped is because it was negotiated away in a debt ceiling deal earlier this summer. So payments are set to resume on October 1st. And this is essentially turning back on the debt extraction machine. The average student loan payment before payments were paused was $400 a month. So, this did and will continue to prevent people from being able to purchase a home, save for retirement, even consider having children, all of the good things, starting a small business, pursuing a different type of career, all of the things that we want people to do to live a life of dignity, to grow the economy, etc. So payments are resuming October 1st. And on top of that, there is sort of this very slow walked path towards relief that's also happening simultaneously. So, if everyone remembers, the Supreme Court knocked down Biden's first attempt at student debt relief. And Biden said, okay, well, I'm going to try to cancel student debt again with a different legal authority. That legal authority is called the Higher Education Act of 1965, which the Debt Collective
right, which originally called for years ago, saying, Joe Biden, you can do this. Here's how to do it. He tried to do it a different way. Supreme Court said no. And look what happened. He goes back to what the Debt Collective suggested. And that added to, honestly, the legitimacy of the Debt Collective. Not that you necessarily needed that, but the fact that you said, hey, this is how you should do it. He didn't do that. Got rejected by the Supreme Court, and now years later, while loans have not been canceled yet, he goes back to what has been suggested, and I think that adds to the legitimacy of everything that the Debt Collective is doing, because it's like, yeah, we knew what we were talking about all along, and we have been. So yeah, I think that's just like, it's funny how that works.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we've said that it's taken the Ed Department and presidential administration months or years to come around to. You would think they would sort of catch the pattern and move accordingly. The HEROES authority that the Biden administration used was legal. The Supreme Court absolutely overreached, and in Justice Kagan's words, violated the Constitution in their knocking down of student debt relief.
Can you talk about what were the issues with the Supreme Court making that decision for people who don't know?
Yeah, so, the Biden administration said they were going to cancel student debt originally using the HEROES authority. So that is, based in emergency authorities, rooted in 9/11, that gives the secretary, broad authority to cancel, to waive or modify student loans in the event of emergency. Well, COVID-19 came, which was an emergency, and a valid use of canceling student debt. The problem is the Supreme Court, really weaved together a slew of problems to say, hey, we don't think the Biden administration can cancel student debt using this type of authority. There are a couple of things that didn't help, right? Like, it didn't help that the Biden administration, it didn't help that Joe Biden himself said that COVID was over, and then moved to cancel student, as he's moving to cancel student
debt. Still happening.
That didn't help, right? As they're now saying you can get free tests. It didn't help that then House Majority Leader Nancy Pelosi was saying Biden administration couldn't cancel student debt. All of those words were used against him.
Yes. Quoted in the opinion, Nancy Pelosi quoted saying, "Oh, we can't actually do this." So thank you, Majority Leader. Great leadership on that.
Right. I mean, there were plenty of mistakes. We could talk about them all day, but the truth is, if the Democratic Party were perfect messengers on student debt relief using the HEROES Authority, there's a good chance the Supreme Court would have knocked it down, because they are a corrupt conservative majority who doesn't want working people to have debt relief. And so the problem from the get-go truly was the Supreme Court even taking up this case to begin with, right? There was half a dozen other lawsuits that were knocked down before it even got to the Supreme Court, because judges said these people, or whoever the slew of plaintiffs were, didn't even have standing to even sue the Biden administration, right? You can't just sue the federal government when they announce a policy that you don't like. That's politics. Then if you don't like something, then you vote. You don't sue the federal government over Medicaid, right? You can't sue the federal government over Social Security or broad sweeping policies. You don't have standing to do that. But in this case, the Supreme Court said, "Oh, we're going to let it happen," and in part, why they were able to let that happen was because they leaned on what's called the major questions doctrine, which is basically a made-up fantasy thing in their heads that says, well, if something is too big, in an arbitrary sense, if we think that it's just too much, if the vibes are off for us, then we are not going to let it slide. And so basically they said, oh, $10,000, $20,000, we're just talking too much money here for people. And so that's part of the reason why they, ultimately denied student debt relief.
Yeah, as someone that went to law school and we're taught about standing, and so for people listening, they may hear standing, may not understand, it's the actual ability by law, by constitution, of the ability to bring a case in court, but also there's special rules for bringing cases in front of the Supreme Court, and usually. You can't just bring and forgive me, who were the plaintiffs? Were they were states, or
there were two lawsuits that ended up getting combined. So one was actually two plaintiffs, a woman who claimed that she wasn't getting student debt relief because she made too much money, and a guy named Alex, just a guy, who said, he's getting 10K of relief instead of 20 because he wasn't a Pell Grant recipient. Then the other, that actually was knocked down. But the other case that, sort of was the nail in the coffin were a couple of states, mainly Nebraska, Missouri, and others, who said, Mohila, the student loan servicer, who's supposed to be, just, a middleman accepting your payments, on behalf of the federal government, Republicans sued on behalf of the student loan servicer, saying, well, if you eliminate student debt, then the servicer is going to have less accounts to service, which means they're going to maybe make less money, which means they maybe. Oh, can you not hear me?
No, I can hear you. I'm saying, oh no, the
the
servicer may not be able to collect payments. That's horrible.
God forbid a company, is not entitled to endlessly grow. You know,
Wow.
you know, but the problem is that math was actually wrong. So that, the premise of the premise, everything was wrong. Every chain in this claim was wrong, fundamentally broken. But ultimately, the long story short is that Republicans sued, and won because Alito, Thomas, Coney Barrett, and others, Kavanaugh, others, basically don't like student debt relief, just like they don't like abortion, just like they don't like solving climate change.
Right, and it's not in their classes purview to actually handle. Supreme Court justices don't have donors, right? But the people that they're affiliated with certainly do not want to cancel student debt, right?
Well,
And
they've kind of got donors.
right, exactly. I don't want to. They don't have they don't have campaigns for people to donate to, but they certainly have things that they can take advantage of, like going on trips and going on boats and shooting on someone's range, maybe even passing away at someone's range in Texas. I don't want to spend too much time on the Supreme Court. I'm sorry. So Supreme student loans are set to turn back on in a few weeks. And I think, you made a good point earlier talking about how the average payment before the pandemic was $400 a month. And that's a significant number to me because there are statistics out there that say something like 60-70% of people can't afford a $400 emergency. So now, the people that maybe could have afforded an emergency over the past few years needed $400-$500. Now that money they're not going to have. Well, the government wants to make sure that they don't have that money. But however, Debt Collective has been encouraging a debt strike. And there are multiple ways to go on strike, but a lot of people can't pay and won't pay. And so can you elaborate a little bit on the strategy of a debt strike and what exactly are you hearing from people in regards to that as student loans are set to turn on in a few weeks?
Yeah, so I think it's probably important to set the scene of where we were in 2019 before payments were paused, just so people sort of understand where the student debt crisis was. 45 million Americans with student loans, largely federal. Average monthly payment $400 a month. There were over 1 million defaulters every year. I mean, someone defaulted on their student loan, borrower defaulted on their student debt virtually every 30 seconds. People had their Social Security checks and wages garnished. People slipped into default or delinquency very easily because it's a crushing amount of debt. Interest balloons, jobs, people are underpaid in their workplaces. And so there was a crisis, which is why there was a call for relief. We have not had major relief since then. We've had a pause on payments, right? But a lot of people's balances haven't actually gone down.
Right.
And so we're basically resuming exactly where we were before that. So we define a student debt strike as people who are paying $0 a month, right? People who are finding various ways to not give a dime to the Department of Education. That has already been happening on some type of scale before 2020, but not in an organized way, right? People were just sort of defaulting on their own because that's where their sort of financial consequences were. And so a strike in a lot of ways is politicizing the situation that a lot of people already find themselves in and using that as a type of leverage to say, I can't pay, well, I won't pay. And that starts to turn into a type of political power, a type of organizing power that could actually start to add some pressure on the system. So a lot of people have been saying, well, payments are resuming. We've gotten so used to not making a payment for the past few months, for the past few years. I just don't want to pay. Right, almost 4 years.
Almost 4 years,
and so
right.
people are saying, I don't want to pay, or I can't pay. I mean, if I make my student loan payment, that means I won't be able to get dental care. That means I won't be able to feed my kids. I mean, and so a lot of people are saying, well, I'm going to put clothes on my children's back. I'm going to eat groceries. I'm going to stay in my home. And so that means I can't afford my student loan payment. So we are organizing a debt strike and facilitating a space for people who are in that financial position, or for politicized reasons just refuse to make a payment. A lot of people are like, I've been paying for 6 years, for 12 years, 18 years, and my balance hasn't even gone down. So why should I keep paying? I mean, it's ridiculous. And so we're saying, we'll just refuse to pay. What's funny is it's never been easier to refuse to make a payment now because of this on-ramp that the Biden administration announced, which is basically, them admitting that they know people aren't going to pay. Right. And so they're calling it an on-ramp, and basically saying from October of 2023 to September of 2024, it's a payment for whatever reason, that you won't fall into default, you won't fall into delinquency, you won't be harmed in terms of your credit. You won't be referred to credit reporting agencies, but you won't be eligible. Missed payments won't be eligible for income-driven repayment or public service loan forgiveness. Your interest will continue to accrue over the next year. And so a lot of people are sort of making decisions where they said, my balance wasn't going down when I was paying, or I'm 14 years away from income-driven repayment. I'm 4 years away from public service loan forgiveness. I'm just going to take advantage and just not pay, at least for the next couple of months, or maybe the year, to see what happens. And so we're basically saying those people are declaring themselves on strike. And so we have facilitated a space where we have thousands of people who have declared themselves on strike, or getting together as a group and saying we're leveraging our inability and or refusal to pay. And we think that's going to have some leverage over the system. And I would argue that the announcement of the on is part of the success of the threat of a strike, right? This sort of like, okay, if you all are going to just not pay, then we're going to sort of tamp down the threat of a strike by saying we won't even refer you to credit reporting agencies. I mean, it is not the golden solution, right? They still should actually have a pause, an actual pause on student debt. They still should actually cancel the debt and fully fund higher education. But in some ways, you can tell that they're while they are resuming payments, they're not resuming it in sort of the harshest way that the federal government has done in years past. So that's sort of how the strike is working. And there's something somewhat passive. I mean, it's very powerful to go on student debt strike, but there's something almost passive about it to say, I'm going to refuse to pay and sort of just sit down. So we've added this sort of more aggressive approach that says, well, I'm not just going to sit here and refuse to pay. I'm also going to demand relief. And so that's why we've announced the student debt release tool, which mimics the history of the first student debt strike back in 2015, the Corinthian student debt strike. So those people didn't just refuse to, pay. They also said, we refuse to pay and we demand you all cancel this debt. And so that's what the student debt release tool is doing. It basically allows people, for the first time ever, to apply directly to the Department of Education and request or demand relief on their student loan debt using the Higher Education Act authority. So this is something we launched only a few weeks ago. tens of thousands of people have already used it. And once you click submit, it goes directly to the Department of Education. It asks you some questions about your loan information, and your name, your birth date, what your student loans are, and then it files a petition on your behalf to the Department of Education. And it also gives you an opportunity to funnel yourself into the debt strike if you want to go on debt strike. So you don't have to go on debt strike in order to fill out this tool, but it certainly combines that. So, that's sort of what we've got going on in terms of organizing against, payments resuming and giving people some type of way where they can say, well, I'm not just going to sit by and let payments turn on. I'm going to at least demand you all cancel my debt. And maybe some of these applications will actually get approved.
Yeah, I mean, this is organizing 101. You all are taking a large set of people with similar conditions, impacted people, and you are you are attempting to, I don't want to say just attempting, you are organizing folks to leverage their debt against the government. And what is so important to actually this specific organizing tactic about student loan debt is the government owns that debt, right? And over the past almost 4 years, they have not collected any student loans, and the economy seemingly has not collapsed, right? The economy has stayed afloat, and it stayed afloat because of essentially it was being propped up by the government, Trump sending checks, PPP loans, which were fraudulent on many parts, and then the student loan pause, and so now they're turning it back on. And from what I've seen, even the most conservative outlets are warning about the economic impact of turning student loans back on. And so it seems it is a little confusing to me that Joe Biden, heading into election year, would not only hurt his electoral possibility with not canceling people's loans and turning loans back on, but the economy, which we can debate and talk about, quote unquote, the economy, but if it has a negative impact on the economy, that's not going to be good for his reelection chances. And so it's a little confusing that even they can see that this is coming, that there is a possibility of a serious impact, and despite that, they are like, nope, we're turning them back on, we're going to collect them. And it doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either. The worst part of it, which is, this is even a little more cynical, is that, as we were talking about the debt ceiling deal, which is when they basically bargained away their position to continue a moratorium, is they made that decision before they knew how the Supreme Court was going to rule. So, the whole, the return to student debt payment was coupled with relief. That was sort of the way the Biden administration announced it, right? Which is like, we're going to go back to repayment. We never said this was permanent, but we're going to do it at the same relief. And so now we don't have relief, but we are returning to repayment. So it's like the worst of both worlds. And there are other means for the Biden administration to go forward with relief at an expedited timeline and to pause student debt payments, right? The HEROES Authority is what allowed him to pause student debt payments, but there's still another authority. There's still the Higher Education Act. There's still other tools at his disposal which he could enact student debt relief, right? We've been saying he could declare a climate emergency, which would give him a new emergency authority to loans, right? So there's ways he could deal with the crisis of student loans and trying to get relief if he actually wanted to. And now he's just harming people, hurting the economy, hurting his reelection chances. And it's not just Biden's reelection chances. It's people all the way down towards the bottom of the ticket who people, I think there's this thinking of, well, is someone really going to, maybe someone who wanted relief or who was not expecting their payments to turn back on, are they really going to vote for Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden? One, maybe. Two, what's also likely is that person stay home. And so you would really think of, not canceling student debt or turning student debt payments back on as suppressing turnout, because that's naturally what's going to happen. So there's political consequences all around for turning student debt payments on, not to mention economic. I mean, there's just way too much to talk about in terms of why would we do this to people in our economy? Just like, why would we let the child tax credit expire? I mean, that was like a couple $100s a month, and child poverty was cut in half.
They celebrated that. That was like Joe Biden has cut childhood poverty in half, and now and before the midterms they hammered that. They were like, "Oh my, this is the greatest president of all time. I can't believe that he did this." And now we're seeing it's a complete reversal, and it's getting worse. And I know that Joe Manchin and Sinema made deals, and that they are impediments. But how can Joe Biden get all of the credit previously for cutting childhood poverty in half, and now when that has been completely undone, is he doesn't deserve the blame? Any blame?
He should get credit when good things happen, and he should it's not his fault when bad things happen. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a flawed logic.
Yeah, it's flawed logic, and yeah, I just pulled up something here saying that student loan restart threatens to bill $100 billion out of consumers' pockets now that over the coming year, in 1 year. And so, yeah, we were saying before that people won't be able to pay for, save for a house or having a kid, or may not have, money for an emergency. And is Joe Biden going to be blamed for, the potential mess that he is creating? No. And the Democrats will be like, well, don't blame Joe Biden. He's going into an election with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is a fascist and, tried to start a coup against the government. So you can't say anything bad about Joe Biden because it's going to hurt his chances. Well, why? Can he just do good things? Also, I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a tangent, but the president of the United States is powerless. He can't find a way to pause student loans again. Like, not even the cancellation, but you're telling me that the president of supposedly the most powerful country on earth can't find a way to do something? I don't buy that.
No, we know he can. Right. I think it's great news that they announced a, Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC.
Yes.
And what's interesting is sort of the way that I think even sort of center-left Democrats react to that news after it's done. Is just like, look, this is really great. We're glad we did this. But the lead up to it, the past 2 years, right, it's like the Green New Deal is too polarizing, and you all are demanding too much of the Biden administration. And then when they finally turn and say, hey, we want to create jobs for young people to tackle climate change, then it's like, great, like this is what we should be doing. So I think we should think of, we can think of these types of bold proposals in the same light of, if once you actually do this, people are going to love it. People are going to get excited about it. And, if you sort of free people's financial well-being up, if you put people in a position, which we saw with semblance of it during the pause, right? During the pause, people were actually able to pay down other debts. A lot of people were actually started to have kids. When on August 24th, 2022, when debt relief was actually announced and people were notified that they were going to actually get their debt relief by the Biden administration, by the government, we had people from all over the country who were saying, oh, finally, I'm going to be in a position where I can, purchase a home, or I can move out of my apartment for the first time, ever, or, living with my parents well into my 30s or even 40s. We've saw what that sort of like financial benefit could look like. And now we're about to see the exact opposite of it. It's really sad, honestly.
Please take it away.
So, in 2015, the Debt Collective had all of these students who were defrauded, former students and current students who were defrauded by these predatory for-profit colleges. Colleges who had lied to them, said that they would get them a job, or sign documents on behalf of them, all of these fraudulent things. And so the Debt Collective found this clause in the Higher Education Act that seemingly just languishing on the books, which basically said, if you were defrauded by a for-profit college, you're eligible for relief, and sort of called borrower defense. And so there was no way where you could actually get that relief. There was no phone number to call, no application existed. No one had really used that authority before. So the Debt Collective created our own application that said, hey, here's some ways that it prompts you to give some evidence, to answer some questions about your loans. And then we sent tens of thousands of applications. It really caught fire to the Department of Education and said, you all need to process these according to the law that's on the books. The long story short is that they did. And they took those applications, processed them, and then mimicked our application, created their own. Now you can go to studentaid.gov if you've been defrauded by a for-profit college, fill out a borrower defense application. It's a bit lengthy, but nevertheless, you can fill out an application. And it pauses your loans, and then they hopefully process your relief should everything go smoothly. That's a huge caveat. The point is that type of process has literally been done before. Or that type of organizing has literally worked, and tens of billions of dollars have been canceled through that authority. We're mimicking that very successful organizing history by creating what's now our student debt release tool, which anyone can use because it invokes the Higher Education Act that says, the secretary has broad authority to cancel someone's student loans. So, over 20,000, I don't know the number now, but tens of thousands of people have already used that tool and said, hey, I'm requesting relief for X, Y, or Z reasons. And we're waiting on the Department of Education to respond. I think, again, there's no guarantee that this would work. I would point to the history with borrower defense. This is a political question, right? This is not a question of the law. It's not a question of bureaucracy. If the Department of Education wants to create their own form, they will. If they want to approve or deny some of these applications, they will. But I think the student debt release tool, which you can go to studentdebtreleasetool.org to apply. But I think the tool, at the least, is going to empower people to demand relief and to shape the larger conversation for the federal government. So, this is a bit bigger of a deal than a regular petition, because the federal government, the FSA in particular, they're mandated to account for all of the ways that borrowers reach out to them throughout the year. And so these files are going to go somewhere. Someone's held accountable for them. And there's also this, sort of slow moving negotiated rulemaking process towards relief. And so I can't see the future. I don't know exactly how this is going to go, but I think that the more people who fill out an application, the more legitimacy that it has, and the more chance that people actually start to slip through the cracks and actually start to get that relief. And the tool, the Higher Education Act, the authority that it invokes, has been successful for people in the past. It's a slim amount of people, and that's just because the Debt Collective knows the authority and can cite the law and knows who to talk to at the Department of Education. A regular working person might not. But this tool streamlines that process for you to be able to make an ask. And I think that's really exciting. So hopefully people fill it out. I know I filled mine out weeks ago.
I filled mine out as well. And for people listening, it is studentdebtreleasetool.org. It's very easy to fill out. And this is a part of organizing and how to wield our collective power. Because, holding student loan debt, it may feel overwhelming, and it may feel that you're in a difficult situation, may feel that you're alone, you don't know what to do. But there are millions of people just like you. And there are people organizing to eliminate student loan debt. And if you're looking for ways to fight back, you're looking for ways to get involved, or even if you're just looking for a way to get some personal relief because you don't know what to do, this is one small step that you can take. Fill out the student loan debt form, the release tool from the Debt Collective. It will send a petition or a letter. I don't know exactly what it is to Department of Education. There are millions of people just like us, and this is how things get changed when people come together and organize around a collective action. And great things, quote unquote, great things in this country have only been accomplished by people pushing on the system. They won't give us what we want. They won't automatically hand it over. It must be pushed and toppled over. And the Debt Collective has done an amazing job, and we're grateful for having you all in this space. And so with that, Braxton, where can people find you?
Oh gosh. Do people want to find me?
If you want to plug any personal stuff, if not, you just don't find me. Follow the Debt Collective.
Yeah, don't find me. You'll just see Succession and Beyonce references. But you can go to @StrikeDebt. Not bad. But you can go to @StrikeDebt on Twitter, or debtcollective.org, or studentdebtreleasetool. And you can find all things Union of Debtors there.
Yes, the union makes us strong, for sure. Braxton, thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the Progressive Hub Show. Cancel student debt, Google LASD gangs, and stop Cop City. Peace.
I love that.